folks, Gluz here. I'm the host of Revenue Engine podcast, where I talk with top leaders in business, marketing, sales, tech, SaaS, and more. We have a great guest for you today. This episode is brought to you by Monroe Digital. At Monroe, we build world-class revenue engines for B2B SaaS and tech companies. Parry, what that means is we do everything behind the scenes to generate you tons of qualified leads, opportunities, and customers. We build highly effective marketing systems and scale them profitably through our demand generation strategies. We think scientifically how to scale your demand and revenue. We bring decades of experience and expertise. Email me at alex@tmonroe.com or visit tmonroe.com today to schedule a strategy session, learn more about the niche. We have a great guest for you today. Hey, Parry, nice to have you here.
Thanks, Alex. Great to be here as well.
Yeah. Can you do a brief intro of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm co-founder and CEO of Tingono. At Tingono, we help SaaS companies to scale their customer success motion and boost net dollar retention. So basically, reduce churn and increase expansion by leveraging our AI agent called Parry.
The big aha moment, I think, for a lot of us was with Claude Code. And out, and really last 3 months, I would say it's really exploded. And it went from the point of, what can it do, to the point of what it cannot do now, what it cannot do. So now we're rethinking, and it would be great to pick your mind as a person who's been successful in doing this for such a long time. Like, where are we going, where we are right now, like what's next, and how do you think about that, Parry?
No, that's a very good observation too, Alex. I think cloud, also the recently they launched like Coworker or something like that, right? And that's been very interesting as well. And I think the Claude Code or Replit or some of the other coding platforms, if you look at it, you realize like how good they are and how quickly they have become good, right? Probably, in a lot of ways, it's because coding itself is a little bit more bound environment where, there are certain things you could do. It's not as, what you call it, like fluid as like general, like for example, if you take sales or post-sales. But I do think it is a matter of time before we get there as well. So, I think the fundamental difference where people have to realize is that, whatever we have done in computer science pre-AI has been deterministic. So, think of this way, right? Like when you were coding, you had like, if this happens, do this. So, but that bounded your universe, right? You could not figure out like all the permutations and combinations which will exist in the wild and then like code for it, right? But now with AI systems, the fundamental difference is that these are probabilistic systems. And so they can say like, okay, I have this much confidence that this should be the next thing. Or so basically predicting. And that's the fundamental piece on which all AI is built. So, a lot of these generative systems are predicting the next word, for example, when they give you an answer. So when we move to this predictive world, and that's the way how humans make decisions too, right? Like based on your experience, what should I do next? Like there's no like, you should always do this. So then if you take that and you say, where is it going? That it is going into all these different areas, which we think of like, okay, from a B2B perspective, it's all already pre-sales, it is in marketing, it's getting into post-sales, eventually like, much deeper into finance and all those kind of things.
Topic. I was always interested in this retention and expansion. So the truth is, everyone spends so much money trying to acquire customers and then hardly invest anything in keeping them. And I think if you can automate the parts of customer success that are predictable, like follow-ups, nudges, risk detentions, you're freeing human to do the strategic work and face-to-face interactions too. And that's when expansion actually becomes a real emotion instead of the threat and hope they renew moment, it's much better, smarter place for AI to play than just write more emails faster.
That's exactly right. And I think that's the transition we're seeing. And I think a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, my job is in jeopardy if AI is doing everything. So I think what you just said was so true, because that strategic work, that building that personal connection with the customer is where humans would really be there, and also overseeing these agents. Because at the end of the day, like we just suck at doing these massive multivariate data analysis in our head, and people don't even want to do that. We should let AI do that kind of busy work. We have customers who exactly follow the pattern you described, right? To give you an example, they would send out these value scorecards, like, hey, this is the value you're getting from the product. 80% of the time, customers don't respond, and that is fine. People are busy with their lives, right? But then sometimes they do respond and ask these deep, meaningful questions, or ask for advice, and that's where they're able to bring in a human. So with a team of 5, they can manage I would say 1,000 accounts, right? So that kind of level of service, it was unheard of using AI. And if I were to take a corollary in that, and I think it's probably what you asked me where we were going, right? So with technology in general. So if you think of it, right, one reason we segment our customers, really truly, we historically have segmented our customers, is that we could not provide, I would say, Nordstrom level of service on Walmart level of prices. Right now, with AI doing all these things, we really don't even need to segment certain set of our customers anymore. You could provide this white glove level of service with such a small number of people, because AI is doing this heavy lifting for you, and then humans are stepping in when the humans are needed. So I think that would be another fundamental shift, and that is what AI is enabling us today.
If somebody's new, like a founder, maybe of a Series A company, coming to you and say, look, churn is killing us, and maybe we tried a few tools, and we still having a lot of churn, and where would we start with AI and your tool? What would you point to them first?
I think, first of all, that, my empathy with them as a Series A founder, this is churn is hard, and it can kill any company. Right? So I think I would really start by looking at their data, and not rely on anecdotal stuff. I've seen a lot of times people get swayed by, oh, this one customer said this to me, so then it should be, it is kind of what is happening. Or, what they forget are quiet quitters. We have those. And people don't even say anything and just goodbye. And then also the squeaky wheel problem, right? Where somebody complains a lot but never turns the direction. So we have to handle that. So I think we look at the data, look at across the breadth of data, and then say, okay, is it and then you can look at the customer journey, right? Is it the marketing, install-based marketing, are they following webinars? Are they, those kind of things? Are they learning about the product the way they should? Product usage, customer support data, customer success data, across that. And then also externally, what is happening, right? Is it, the customers you're selling into, is that industry itself facing headwinds? I don't know if you are working with importers and suddenly tariffs hit them. Who knows, right?
Right.
So you have to bring all that in, and then, based on that, do a data-driven analysis of exactly what is happening. To give you an example, yes, churn is not only a problem with Series A, it is a problem across the board, right? Later stage companies too. And we have a lot of CS leaders, they'll come to us and they're there's a lot of finger pointing. Be honest, we live in corporate America. There is okay, CS is not doing his job, or, our product is not doing its job and is deficient, or sales is selling into the wrong ICP, or, all that kind of stuff, right? People are trying to just, say finger point and say oh, these are the reasons why the churn is happening. But if you do the kind of analysis I was just talking about, where you really say like, okay, the breadth of the data for this cohort of customers, this group of customers, this is what is happening. For these ones, this is what is happening. Then you can actually make a business level decision, right? Like if it's a product issue, let's invest in product in that area. If it's a support issue, let's, figure out what we can do there. So it has to be data driven. A lot of people have talked about it for a very long time, but we should be data driven. But now the technology is there, and it is so much easier to hook in data sets, to do the analysis, has AI, do that for you so that you can make those decisions really quickly. So at least you get out of that morass of, just waiting.
Yeah, that's a great point, and there's a lot to unpack here. So, it's also the approach to start with the highest impact, lowest efforts wins. Questions like where the customer churn, is it a specific segment? The anecdotal stuff is still very true, and people start panicking, and when you start reaching to the data and you're saying, oh, actually this segment is quite normal percentage, but maybe something happened back to back and it's just a coincidence, and you're like, all of the banking customers are quitting. But in reality they didn't. It's just using the averages, right? It's just something might have triggered that, and might be, like you said, external events too, which we don't control. And AI is great to really get the data and analyze the data and then present this probabilistic suggestions and kind of see the trends, and then you can keep at the trends and see if it aligns, how it presents the future scenarios, so to say. Also, I love the idea what you said about marketing. I think it's also so important. Does the marketing play the role, right? Like these people are getting engaged with marketing materials, things like that. It might be to the point of, we do need to do that. We need to do webinars. Maybe we need to do in-person events for the existing customers, because there is not enough education, and that it's a separate function needs to get involved. It's not necessarily the product, it's the education part of it. And also customer success needs to work better, and making sure the value, like you're saying, the value is delivered. So one question comes up here is, since you're working in SaaS, so now the trend will be, with all this technology evolving, can we build this in-house? It's a big thought. So should we buy this tool, or maybe we should now, with all the knowledge available, build this in-house? Like, what's going on with that?
Yeah, that's an interesting conundrum too, and I think that was one of the reasons that you asked me why the stock market kind of like collapsed and like really went down. Like, at least the SaaS stocks just were hit, because people were thinking like, do you really need all these SaaS offerings out there? You should be able to build a lot of it in-house. So yeah, and I think that there is something there to it, right? I think a lot of times things are not black and white. There are certain things you would be able to build in-house, but then there's certain things for which you would still need outside expertise. So like, for example, you could build certain models in-house. You could leverage LLMs to do, certain automations, like the point automations, the way I like to think of it. For example, take the data from incoming leads are coming in, from this place, put it in, what Zapier used to do basically some ways, take it and put it in my CRM, for example. You could have Claude to do that for you today. But, I think when it comes to stitching in different data sources, looking at, what model would work, because it's not just like leveraging GPT directly, but it'll also be like, where do you use machine learning? How do you build those models? What kind of data sources you feed in? What kind of testing you want to do, or what kind of agents should be there, versus checking the work of the other agents. Then you're coming into a full flow of things, and that is harder to do in-house, right? You could always do it, but would you rather do that, or invest in what is your core competency? The question would come to. I'm an engineer, so I would always tell you could build anything in-house. If you ask an engineer, they would never say, no, it cannot be done. But I think as a business, as an executive, you have to decide, is this what I want to do, for example?
So one thing you mentioned, Parry, when we chatted before, and said executives need to be AI fluid, but most still don't understand that AI is probabilistic, not deterministic. And just in general, I personally believe there's a huge gap in education on all levels in any organization. Like, how do you see, or how do you guys internally address it? Or how do you see this gap really addressed?
Right. And I think it is really interesting in a lot of ways, right? Because there's a lot of, so like when I was doing my first company, it was an AI company as well. It wasn't, like we mentioned, it was in CX space, but we were targeting like researchers and looking at visuals, like videos and, basically that kind of analysis. And at that time, I really had to convince the executives, saying there's value in here, you could see it working, and so on. This time around, it is different, right? It's like a lot of push comes from the executive side. Like boards are really like, how can we, adopt AI to be more productive, be faster? And like you said, you are looking at your own company, your own team, seeing what we can automate. But, a lot of these projects are still not bringing, like, would you call it like the value people were looking for? There was a survey out, and I'm terrible at remembering where it was. But it was like 85% of the companies are not seeing value, something like that. Right?
Yeah.
And, I think we see it in our customer base too, because the ones who are having difficult time like adopting, and when I talk to people, it is that this knowledge about AI and how it works is really lacking. So people, like we talked about, people still think of it as computer science. If this happens, then this should happen. But these are probabilistic models, right? So, they would say like, okay, let's take a churn example, right? So it's saying that in a rules-based world, you would say a customer who's not logging in will churn, into my product. Defined rules will always show you red, big red, right? In probabilistic world of AI, it'll say like, oh, there's a 90% chance that this customer would churn. Now, it's a very simple example because there are other things which, it'll take everything into account and then say there's a 90% chance that this customer might churn. So that 90% chance means that there is a 10% case where, a lot of times AI would be, incorrect. So now if you're thinking like 10,000 customers, you're thinking like, oh, in 1,000, instances, when it is predicting out 6 to 9 months, it'll be incorrect. So a lot of people latch on to that and they say like, oh my gosh, it is only 90% accurate. So should I, believe or trust it, right? So then they make that as a benchmark. So I think the first people have to realize that these are probabilistic systems. They would not be 100% accurate. But then, but then the marginal cost of acting on what the AI is telling you is so low because you could automate it too. So the same, I was saying earlier, your workflows should not be the same either. So in that way, it does add substantial value. So I think there's one predictive aspect and probabilistic aspect. And then there's another aspect is that your workflows necessarily do not need to be the same with AI. That's another thing people have to understand. I was in a call with a prospect last week, actually. Really good company, very, very good fit with Tingono. But I was on the call and they kept on asking me things like, oh, but where do I enter all these notes? Or where do I on our platform, where do I put in all these things I want to, the various things I want to analyze? And I'm trying to explain that, that's what they're used to from traditional customer success platforms. So I'm trying to explain, you don't need to do that anymore. AI is actually doing this for you. So, it's not the same workflows either. So I think the two aspects where this is not going to be deterministic. So you should be okay with certain probabilities. And then you should model your workflows so that they can handle these without a lot of cost to you, are the two areas where, executives as well as everyone under them has to get to.
Question is, where is it going right now? Like overall, like SaaS, industry, because there's obviously a lot of things popping off left and right, but also it seems that the big companies also kind of, they expanding their product lines.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think bringing AI in is not like a choice anymore. I think if you're not doing it, I don't even know anyone who's not doing it, like, to be honest, right? So everybody is bringing in AI. So now that brings us to what is the value, that AI brings in. So where the industry is going, we would see shakeup, right? A lot of companies would go away, the new companies would arise, primarily because, I think the ones who would be really, really, truly successful are the ones who are updating the workflows, right? And it's not like you can't just slap a ChatGPT kind of interface on top of your existing product and say, yes, we have an AI offering, chat with it, right? That's not gonna, really, really like help you in the long term, because to your point earlier, why not build it in-house? You know what I mean? So I think there would be like some of the, I think the AI native companies would survive. And also for existing companies, I think the existential threat is the business model they have today, where mostly, across the board, it is, seed-based, right? So you have these many users, you sell licenses for that, and you're good to go. That should not and could not survive AI, because, like if you're an AI agent, like in our case, it manages all your accounts, brings in humans when your humans are needed. How do we even charge based on seats? Like, it doesn't even make sense, right? Because it is, not seat-based at all. Like, there's no correlation. It just manages in the background. It's like hiring an employee who has infinite bandwidth. So, but existing companies, they just can't move forward and say, okay, we will not charge seat-based. Then how do they go charging? The one option that people have been putting out there is outcome-based pricing. But outcome-based gets complicated, because how do you attribute a certain outcome? We were talking about churn. How do you know a churn was prevented by Tingono versus, prevented by your team launching a brand new functionality? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it becomes attribution becomes complicated. So I do think, there's a fundamental rethink has to happen, not only on the technology side, but also on the business side. In our case, the way we charge is we build these AI models, and, when we say AI agents, it is complicated in the sense that it is not only leveraging generative AI, but it's also doing a lot of predictive AI, based on which we then generate actions and recommendations and act on it, right? So we charge based on these models we built for you, plus like the number of accounts we are managing for you. So we think there's a direct tie-in to the value we provide. So I think that's where a lot of companies have to move. I doubt it'll be an easy transition. First, they're not AI native. And then secondly, just transitioning the whole business model. It'll be interesting to see.